All right, I know we have others coming in. We're going to go ahead and start this on time. Today, we are going to talk about Pinterest for destination marketing organizations. Some really cool stuff we've learned over COVID, over the last few years, and why Pinterest really is a prime opportunity for destination marketing organizations to do more with less. And we're all kind of in that phase right now. Especially the topic is just will not go away, and especially during COVID, the topic of relevancy is really, really important. So this is another channel, and when I say another, maybe you replace a channel that's not working for you, but this is a channel where you can really justify your marketing spend and how things are going and increase tourism, residents, staycations, all of that kind of good stuff in your recovery plan for your destination. So I just want to start by introducing myself to some of you who I may not have met before. My name is Jennifer Barbie. I am co-founder and co-CEO of Destination Innovate. We're a full service consulting firm just for marketing destinations. So that's everything from relevancy to media to advertising, all that kind of good stuff. We developed Destination Innovate after being agency veterans for almost 30 years and really frustrated with the way agencies, work with their clients and the lack of commitment culture and really partnering. So this is really our passion and kind of what we do. And so this is why when I have something like this Pinterest strategy or something specifically unique to help destinations do better, this is where we jump in and really want to share our information. So without further ado, we're going to jump right into this, and we are recording. So we will make sure to have this recording for you if you'd like to go after that. Also, I've hit some top line points on this deck so that you can follow along or take notes, and happy to share this with you guys when we're done with our little talk today. So first, why Pinterest? I mean, I know Pinterest has been out there a really long time, but a lot of us really don't think about Pinterest in terms of being a top social channel. It is the third largest social media platform in the world. 43% of internet users have a Pinterest account. 2 billion searches happen on Pinterest each month, which puts it as a quote unquote search engine. A lot of people don't think of social media as a search engine, but if you look at it, actually the number one search engine is Facebook, then Google, YouTube, and Pinterest comes right under that. 2 billion searches on Pinterest means that you have the opportunity to really show up when people are in the mindset of needing to get into their happy place or discovering things. Pin advertising actually reaches more than Instagram. So you have a lot more opportunity with your Pinterest advertising, which is a significantly less cost of advertising also than Facebook. And Facebook is still a very undervalued cost of advertising, Google being like the highest out there, the most expensive for platform direct. But Pinterest is really, really low if you know what you're doing and you set your advertising strategy up right. So let me give you kind of an example of what we looked at as a case study and what really worked well for actually a very small destination with a very small budget. So here's some results that we saw from, again, a very small budget. We completely flipped what happened in September of last year to September of this year. So this is what's possible for you with Pinterest. If you see last year, organic search, and most of you probably see this, organic search is always kind of the top referral for your website traffic. Completely flip that from social being the top source of the traffic in terms of conversions. And then Pinterest being a 124,000% increase in traffic from Pinterest year over year, just with a little bit of strategy and a little more concentration. If you can see here, you're flipping that source. You're talking about a 10-cent cost per click going direct. And we always suggest that you do platform direct. It's a way for you to save money. It's a way to cut out those opaque advertising costs that go through other agencies. It's a great way to do that. And this gives you some insights on audience development. It has very, very high conversions. And down in the bottom right, you can see what might be surprising to you is look how high the gender of male is. just for this one particular month and this particular thing. So there is not a gender bias like we think about. It's just for weddings or it's just for parties. Pinterest has great applications for your audience development. So just wanted to hit a quick case study so you can see what's possible with this one pin you see over here. This is a stone crab pin, and it's actually a zoom in of a much larger picture. And that's something we're going to talk about when I get to creative a little bit, because it does matter how creative comes across in terms of the pins and how people see them. So we're going to go right into narrative psychology and getting these pinners to trust you, love you, book a vacation, come patron one of your local businesses. So the big thing you've got to think about is shifting this mindset. Facebook is not Pinterest. Pinterest is not Facebook. Facebook is more of a true communal, and Instagram as well, instant channel. So it's constantly, and it becomes kind of a burden on our social media managers too, because it's a feed me, feed me, feed me kind of mindset. But Pinterest is made up of ideas, and it's really the happy place. You don't have the back and forth there. You don't have a lot of trolls, commentary, no negativity. It is a perfect storm of marketing opportunity for destinations. Again, if we just pump up the strategy just a little. So think about completely shifting your mindset. If you wrote something on Facebook or even Instagram, it tends to work better if it's a little more clickbaity, if you will. So it might be don't miss. So it's a missing out. It's a peer envy mindset, where Pinterest is more of an inspirational, this can be you, this is how we want to help you mindset. So it's a completely different mindset when you shift from Facebook, Instagram to Pinterest. So we also want to think about strategy here. Strategy should really be where we're thinking top of mind first, plan, 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 measure twice, then cut. Your analytic strategy should definitely be first. Make sure your analytics are hooked up in your traffic and on Pinterest as well, and really try to dive in and read between the numbers. Look great if you look at just a number, but what's underneath that number? What are the habits? What is the psychology really telling you there? And that comes into audience profiles. So when you think about audience profiling, you know, historically, when you make an ad buy, or historically when you're thinking about something, you're thinking about geographics, which have completely changed in COVID. You may have had a fly market before, or you may have always had a strong drive market, but geographics really are underneath a psychographic mindset right now, especially when it comes to Pinterest. And we'll talk about those trends and how you can really dial into those trends and match them to your audience and all that kind of good stuff. Seasons, the reason I really highlighted this is there's nothing more seasonal than Pinterest. And I had the opportunity to work with, as a Pinterest partner, work with some people over at Pinterest who actually let me know this year was a huge shift in trends in terms of the seasons. Normally people start looking at holiday and fall season and all that kind of good stuff around July. This year it started as early as April. So think about the fact that there's an escape for these pinners, for these users to really, you know, dream, plan, go type of thing. So you want to get way ahead of the seasons instead of, oh heck, it's now going to be Thanksgiving in another month, so we better get some pins out there. Think about the fact that this is also evergreen. These things are going to live a long time. So get way in front of your seasons when you're talking about strategy and planning. Trends.pinterest.com is an incredible resource to see what's trending today. You can look at what's trending specifically with the keywords you might want to use, and I'll show you that in just a second. You also want to think from your strategy in terms of a fresh pin strategy. Let's say you've already put some pins out there and you've had some great success with some of them, which we'll talk about what to do with that, but maybe you haven't had some success with others. So think about a fresh pin strategy of how can you repackage this? Is the pin not performing as well because there's too much going on the image? Is it not visually compelling? Maybe it doesn't have a seasonal filter on it. There can be a lot of ways that you can really recycle your content instead of always creating new content and make that a fresh pin strategy. An evergreen mindset is super important when it comes to Pinterest. When it comes to something like Facebook or Instagram, you have a very short opportunity. Yes, it's still on the page for a long time, but it's not going to continue to recycle. But now in Pinterest, with the new smart search, their algorithms changing, there's an evergreen mindset to this, that what you plan right now, let's say you're going to go ahead and do the rest of your holiday boards or your holiday planning with smart search algorithms, as Pinterest is really blowing up and doing a lot of work in their technology, then you have the opportunity for those pins to work for you next year as well. And you really want to break out your pins. I've noticed a few destinations who do an incredible job of putting their content together. Let's say it's a fall guide, but you've got the guide and it goes to one post. So if you think about breaking that out, you know, having a board for your guide and really breaking out, maybe it's a whiskey sour mash cocktail that you're that you are highlighting, that's a great pin. So you definitely want to think about those pins being very specific, because as you're scrolling through Pinterest, you're not as attracted to a collage unless you're specifically looking for lots of ideas on one thing. But one pin taking you to the proper place, getting what you expect, is a really good idea. And then also what is fairly new, and depending on your account, you may have access to this, is story pins. Now, I love story pins, and Pinterest is really giving preference to these story pins because it's really new and a lot of people aren't taking advantage of it. So if you think about layering in story pins into your strategy, you have a great opportunity to be featured by Pinterest themselves, because there's not a lot of people doing them yet. So early to market on this is a great way to get some visibility. The only thing you need to think about from a strategic standpoint when it comes to story pins is that story pins don't have a very visual link to go to the final destination. So if you're going to do story pins, this is where you might want to use some wording to make it very clear where they can go, because otherwise you kind of have to hover over the story pin and it's in the bottom, tiny little bottom left-hand corner. So there's story pins are really more about brand awareness than traffic and conversion generation, but a great opportunity to get extra awareness in your strategy. So I'm going to take you a little bit into some trends screenshots right now. So if I were a destination in mind, I see here are the trends happening with fashion, food and drink. I may think that has nothing to do with me. But if you look a little deeper into just this fashion one, for instance, you have gold aesthetic. And I'm going to hit aesthetic in a minute, but how many like cool places, maybe hotels, maybe it's a very cool restaurant that has some sort of gold aesthetic in it. So look at the trends and connect it back to your stakeholders, to your businesses. What is it that you can do to be part of that trend? And so you see weekly trends in there. You can go in and get examples of the highest performing pins. Like this one under gold aesthetic is really just a very simple gold mirror. So it's surprising what trends really well. It's not an overcomplicated thought process when you're connecting these trends. And then food and drink, you see the highest ones trending right now. And of course it's fall, so they're going to be apple crisp, apple recipes, pumpkin everything, right? So what are your restaurants doing? What are some of the boutique bakeries doing that visitors and staycationers and residents might really be interested in? So pulling those little micro trends out go a long way for a very successful Pinterest strategy. And I pulled out aesthetic on purpose because if you can see below, you can also search in your trends.pinterest.com. So if I look at travel overall, you see the blue line is kind of trending down. There were some spikes of people thinking about it. It's not terribly trending down. It's still a pretty decent volume, but a generic spray strategy here would not be something I'm looking at. But if I look at travel aesthetic on top of that, because you can layer in different keywords, you see this huge spike in travel aesthetic. So a travel aesthetic, again, these are like zeroed in, more specific types of pins than just an overall. A beautiful downtown works great, but a travel aesthetic may be a real close-up of, something that's very unique or cool or going on in your destination. Pay attention to these micro trends and don't rush your strategy until you fully understand how the trends will apply to your Pinterest strategy. So I go through this exercise with pretty much every client and everything I do, just to make sure that we have a full strategic plan and we really understand what we're going to do before we do it. The first is to master the message. What's the core benefit to the user? And also make sure this is not just pumping out content for content's sake. We really want to serve, and what's so perfect about destinations in the travel industry is we care so much about people. We care about our community. We care about our destination. So flipping this back, what is the core benefit of coming to our Pinterest board for the user? Are they going to be inspired? Are they just planning? How do you connect this maybe to meeting planners, event planners, because they have a huge audience on Pinterest when you talk about planners. So don't forget, they're also looking, you also have a B2B kind of a subtle psychology here that you need to be thinking about when you're mastering your message. And then breaking out the plan. Keep it simple. You want 3 goals, because once you keep it, I want you to keep it simple, because in those goals, I'm going to ask you to drive down just a little bit further. So with each goal needs to have a six-month milestones, and each one of those milestones need 5 action steps and a timeline. So that way you have this fully fleshed out. So instead of just this big generic content calendar, which is not as effective, I suggest going through a planning exercise like this, because planning from an emotional, a feeling, a psychology standpoint will get you so much further. And then the content part is easy. The creative part is really, really simple in how you bundle those ideas. Finding your tribe, finding the people who connect on an emotional level with what your destination has to offer. You definitely need a general message, but you also need target messaging. What kind of problems do they have that you solve? What kind of dreams do they have that you fulfill? And it may be a bucket list type thing, or it may just be a simple relaxation thing, especially with all of us homeschooling our kids for so long. Doing those sort of things are really good too. Oh, thank you, Randy. I'll make sure that you get that recording, no problem. And also for anybody else in here, I am going to do a quick Q&A at the end. So I'll check that chat out in just a little bit. So the culture we own, where our tribe lives, provide sample experiences. This is really where you can get people into the mindset of really being there, because if they've never gone there in the mind, they're not going to go there in the body. So videos are a great way, and they do exceptionally well on Pinterest, because a lot of people still aren't doing videos on Pinterest. Another early opportunity here to put people in the mindset of being there. And when you provide that sample or putting people in the mindset, think about not overly produced videos, so to speak, but use some of your videos that are first person. So what's it like if I'm kayaking? What's it like if I'm hiking your trails? What's that first person perspective? That virtual experience is going to go much longer than we think post-COVID. But right now, really shifting all of our best practices and our relevancy and all that kind of good stuff while we're in COVID, we're going to have a very long tail of evergreen opportunity. You definitely have to earn that right to ask for the booking or for the sale, so to speak. So this is still a relationship, though it's not Facebook. You're not chatting back and forth necessarily with your followers. It is a brand trust. It is a trust issue before they're really going to book with you. And then collaborate when you can. Influencers, of course, when you think influencer, you think Instagram, and that's awesome, but there's collaboration opportunities with personal brands and personal content creators on Pinterest as well. Have them share your pins, have them save your pins. Think about your influencer strategy in terms of collaboration, especially with taking your budget a little bit further than just a straight spend. How do you multiply your impact and conversions? Maybe by using the ad platform. How can you recreate some content that works specifically for Pinterest that may have worked really well on Facebook? What's your breakthrough look like? Where are you now? And what do you consider really successful when it comes through to a Pinterest strategy? And then how do you stay in action? Because it's really easy, especially on Pinterest, because it's not a feed me, Facebook, Instagram type thing. You've got to really plan to stay in action and stay in front and realize the full potential of what Pinterest can do for your destination. So let's go into the details just a little bit of some of the questions I think I got putting this together. So for the details, it's really important to flesh out your descriptions. Your description should include hashtag. Think search engine optimization. As I mentioned earlier, Pinterest being one of the larger search engines, if you will, out there in terms of social media. So even though when you're looking or scrolling through your phone or looking at Pinterest, the descriptions only show you a little bit, there's a lot of benefit to going ahead and fleshing out those descriptions per pin. Don't just put it on your board and forget the actual pin. So think search engine optimization in mind. Hashtags are really good. Don't spam your brand name. I know we have really strict brand standards sometimes when it comes to destinations, but you don't have to repeat your brand name. Let the pin take them there. And I'm going to show you an example from a large brand who does a really good job of this in just a sec. And the guides I mentioned before, when you do guides or long blog forms, don't just put one pin out there for going to that overall blog. Pull those little pieces out, those little nuggets, get those images in and do specific pins and take the user exactly where they expect to go. Don't make them hunt, don't make them work. Remember, this is an inspiration channel. It should be very fun and very easy, and people should be dreaming and planning about your destination. So from a creative standpoint, again, with your brand, you want to think about filters and seasonality. And I actually pulled Target out as one of the great brand examples of how they brand, but don't overbrand in terms of their creative. You see there's two going on right now for Halloween, and there's two different ones. And Target always does just 3 words on their overall words on that pin. And that gives that breadth and that air to these really cool photos, to things that we want to do. And ultimately we'll probably go home and have a Pinterest fail, which could also be fun. But if you notice, what I love about Target is those just simple 3-word call to actions. And if you notice in their description on the side, they don't say Target's Halloween baking ideas. It's just Halloween baking ideas. Once they find you, then there's a brand affinity, but there's no selling in that title. And on their pins, they do the same thing. I start to recognize and see their brand flavor here is they just do a small logo icon right in the bottom left. So I know when I see those, that's something I may really want to jump into. But from a creative standpoint, you know, we have that opportunity. So think about your seasonality. Again, maybe using some of your old pins, giving them a filter for your seasons, for your fall, for holidays coming up, for spring, even for summer next year. Think about the way you do your photo treatment. Don't take over that image with your branding. This is for them, and that way it will come back to you. Put good out, you get good back. Time lapse and video are another great opportunities here. Very subtle branding. Keep it very, very small. When you're thinking about creative, if you don't have a creative team, one thing I suggest is go to your Pinterest phone app for inspiration, and don't stop. Just scroll, scroll, scroll. Don't stop until something really catches your eye. And then ask yourself, now, what was it about that made that so interesting to me? Is it a personal preference? Is it the way they stylize it? Take your business hat off before you go into your creative planning and really think about what turns you on from looking at certain things. And really think about what it is, not just that once you find that photo or that pin that really inspires you from a visual standpoint, then go to visit wherever the website is and see what happens there. The only thing I can say that's not awesome about these 2 Target opportunities is it takes you, of course they're selling products, so it takes you to products to buy, and it doesn't really give you the rest of it. It's too much of a teaser for me. So I want to see the meat on the end of the stick, if so to speak. So now let's talk a little bit about how advertising works on Pinterest. As I mentioned, And you saw earlier in a case study, a 10-cent cost per click. You cannot beat that anywhere. It is a very inexpensive form of advertising. I suggest platform direct, and I always suggest platform direct for a lot of reasons. One of those reasons is because you cut out all the fat that you may have going through a third-party media buyer. Now, you definitely want to have professionals working with you on this kind of stuff, because it can get tricky, and the optimization specifically, you want to make sure of getting not just the lowest cost, but the right audience. Think about habits, not geography. Again, we've shifted all of that as destinations when it comes to COVID, and it comes to like every best practice we ever had, the rule book kind of gone. But what's not gone are how people feel and how they respond to things and what they're thinking. So you have opportunities like your overall audience, act alike. If you have pins that have performed really well, you can look at other pinners that act like the people who've reacted to those pins. Placements or optimization opportunities, so you can decide where those ad placements happen, interest, keywords, even down to device. So you can actually optimize your advertising, your pins per device. So if they have an iPhone, this is the ad that they get served. But if they have an Android, they get served something else. So there's some really clever things you can do when it comes to advertising that helps accelerate all of that. And definitely look at your most popular pins. How do you accelerate those results? How do you duplicate what's going on? Look at those that may not have been successful or you don't have any clicks or shares, saves, all that kind of good stuff. Take a look at those and rethink about it with advertising. And you can throw very, very little at it to kind of test some of these theories. Life moments and holidays perform the best. People think about themselves, of course. Again, all social is narrative psychology. What's in it for me? If Pinterest is my happy place and I don't have to deal with the trolls and the back and forth and the negativity, what I want to see are life moments that I want to recreate for myself and my family. Those do really, really well in advertising. Home content also does well. And of course, specifically because we've been in COVID, people are really thinking about their home, but home content does really well. So how do they take a piece of your destination home with them? Highlight some of that. Use your user-generated content to pin and use that for an advertising opportunity as well. Once you have established some really good metrics out of Pinterest from advertising, you can also consider some co-op boards. Maybe, obviously right now is not a great time to go out and ask your stakeholders for money, because you need to establish your relevancy first. But if you are a member organization or you do need to justify that, consider some very inexpensive co-op with boards and pins with your stakeholders. So I want to hit with that. We're going to do some last words and then I'll take some questions. And again, we're recording, so we should be good. Most importantly with Pinterest is have fun. Facebook and Instagram has become so daunting. And if you're still doing Twitter, that's great, but look at your numbers too. And when you really hit your Pinterest strategy, like the example I showed you above in terms of that, you kind of look and go, look at all this traffic we're getting from Pinterest, and I don't see even one from Twitter. Like, what are we thinking? Like, let's have fun with this and really double down on what can work for you. Definitely, if you're inclined to do so, get an impact evaluation about your Pinterest board. Maybe it'll give you some good inspiration or tips or ways that you can think about how to alter your strategy in Pinterest and get a whole lot more. And then, just pin away, just that you can't break it. It's just like social media. And because you don't have the trolls, you have the ability to put the pins out there. If they don't perform, that's fine. You should be creating your board secret first before you put them all out there, and make sure you're completely organized. Really think through the content that you want to push out there. Again, if it's centered around a blog or centered around a staycation opportunity or centered around something specific, then you want to unbundle that in a way that's not just repeat strategy for Facebook and Instagram. These are totally different mindsets when they get here, and you've got to reflect that when you do. So hopefully you've got some great tips out of some of this. And of course, I'm available for any questions. If you guys want a quick Pinterest evaluation or just chat, talk to us, do some virtual coffee. My email address is below, but I'm just going to open it up for any questions. All right, great. Well, I hope everyone has a great day. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And I'll be happy to follow up and share the deck just kind of so you can take notes on it if you'd like. But really appreciate everyone's time today. And I hope that Pinterest can be really helpful for you. And I hope I can inspire you to reach those metrics that you saw before. I mean, it's amazing to flip from pre-COVID numbers and even outperform just using a simple Pinterest strategy. Thank you, guys.